Hello, my name is Kius Suárez, and I am presenting my thesis titled Intercultural Competence in Bilingual Education, a documentary analysis of theoretical frameworks, assessment models, and pedagogical approaches under the guidance of Professor Jonathan Alexander Delgado Ochoa. My research explored how intercultural competence is conceptualized, assessed, and taught in bilingual education with a particular emphasis on the Colombian context. Let me begin by establishing why this research matters both globally and locally. In today's globalized world, international organizations agree that intercultural competence is essential for peaceful and democratic societies. Although education systems worldwide, including the American Council on the Teaching of Foreign Languages in the US, positions intercultural and global competence as fundamental learning goals, important gaps remain between policy and actual classroom practice. In bilingual education, research shows that language learning alone does not guarantee intercultural competence. Strong additive bilingual programs foster intercultural growth, while weak or assimilationist models do not. In South America, scholars such as Wells highlight interculturalidad as a transformative decolonial project that challenges historical inequalities. In Colombia, national bilingual policies present English as a tool for global integration, yet studies reveal that intercultural communicative competence is largely absent from standards and materials, which often reproduce narrow cultural views and overlook local contexts. Given these tensions, this brings me to the core problem my research addresses. Despite strong global and regional recognition of its importance, intercultural competence is not clearly defined, represented, or promoted in the documents that guide bilingual education in Colombia. This gap prevents teachers, curriculum designers, and policymakers from effectively supporting intercultural development in schools. By providing a systematic analysis of documents that currently guide bilingual education practice in Colombia, the research aims to contribute to more intentional theoretical grounded approaches to develop intercultural competence in Colombian bilingual education. Therefore, my research asks, what theoretical frameworks and pedagogical approaches for developing intercultural competence in bilingual education exist in current literature? Generating two sub-questions. How is intercultural competence conceptualized and assessed across existing literature on bilingual education, and what pedagogical approaches for developing intercultural competence have been documented in bilingual education research? The general objective is to examine these three dimensions: conceptualization, assessment, and pedagogical implementation through systematic documentary analysis of existing literature. More specifically, I aim to examine how intercultural competence is conceptualized and assessed across existing literature in bilingual education, comparing major theoretical frameworks, and to synthesize pedagogical approaches documented in bilingual education research for fostering intercultural competence. My research is grounded in three complementary theoretical models that together provide a comprehensive lens for understanding intercultural competence. First, Michael Byron's intercultural communicative competence framework. He proposes 5 savoirs: knowledge of self-other, attitudes of openness, skills of interpreting relating, skills of discovery interaction, and critical cultural awareness. This model is widely used in language education and provides concrete criteria for evaluating curricula and materials. Second, Milton Bennett's developmental model of intercultural sensitivity, which traces how individuals progress through 6 stages of intercultural understanding. Bennett explains intercultural development as a progression from ethnocentric stages to ethno-relative stages. This helps analyze whether educational materials encourage deeper, non-stereotypical engagement with cultural difference. And last, Darla Terdroff's process model of intercultural competence, which conceptualizes intercultural development as a cyclical process starting with foundational attitudes, followed by knowledge and skills, leading to internal outcomes and external outcomes. It emphasizes that intercultural competence is not an endpoint, but an ongoing process. The literature review examines how intercultural communicative competence has been conceptualized, implemented, and assessed in bilingual and foreign language education across diverse international and Latin American contexts. Across the 35 studies analyzed, there is strong theoretical convergence around Michael Byron's model of ICC. Other important theoretical contributions include Milton Bennett's developmental model of intercultural sensitivity, Darla Derdroff's process model, and Claire Cram's concept of the third space, highlighting that language is inseparable from culture. A shared premise across all studies is that language teaching cannot be reduced to grammar and vocabulary. As Cramsch argues, language is never a culture-free code. A major recurring theme is the gap between policy discourse and classroom implementation. For instance, Henao Mejia analyzed Colombia's national textbook series English Please and found that only 19% of activities addressed any dimension of intercultural awareness, mostly limited to factual BC culture. Ahmed and others found that Yemeni teachers express positive attitudes toward integrating culture, yet actual classroom practices remain minimal. Sandorova demonstrated that commercial textbooks often claim CEFR alignment but fail to systematically develop ICC components. These findings reveal a consistent discrepancy between institutional intentions and pedagogical reality. Despite these gaps, the literature provides strong evidence that ICC can be successfully developed when instruction is intentional and systematic. Hence, several effective approaches emerge. Literature-based interventions. Rezai and Nagibian demonstrated that short stories combined with guided reflection develop critical cultural awareness among Iranian university students. Urerata Goyena showed that medieval and Renaissance literature facilitated decentering and metacultural awareness in teaching trainees. Munaru Saken documented increased empathy and intercultural sensitivity in Colombian elementary students through children's literature addressing migration. These studies highlighted literature as a powerful medium for fostering reflection, empathy, and perspective taking. Company and Zivero found that creative adaptations and literature and literary texts using ICT promoted intercultural mediation skills. Mitchell demonstrated that Web 2.0 tools such as Wiki and Pinterest initially produce ethnocentric responses, but when combined with a structured reflection, facilitated movement toward ethno-relativism. A key insight here is that technology alone does not foster ICC. Guided reflection is essential. Duque Salazar and others identify tensions in South American rural bilingual education, particularly Colombia's emphasis on Spanish-English bilingualism, while marginalizing indigenous languages. Peñaranda and others demonstrated that elementary students can develop respect and recognition of indigenous cultures through structured interventions. These studies reveal ideological tensions between economic bilingualism and intercultural multilingual justice. Across contexts, Europe, the Middle East, America, and Asia, four major themes emerged. ICC is multidimensional and transformative, not merely informational. Textbooks and curricula often reduce culture to visible products rather than critical engagement. Teachers play a central mediating role, yet frequently lack training or institutional support. Assessment remains underdeveloped, especially regarding effective and critical dimensions. Despite significant progress, several research gaps remain. Limited research in urban privileged bilingual schools, especially in Colombia. over-reliance on short-term interventions rather than longitudinal studies, insufficient integration between theoretical models and classroom assessment tools, and limited attention to how bilingual programs conceptualize ICC in official documents and curricular texts. This literature review informs my documentary research by demonstrating that institutional documents and textbooks mediate how ICC is conceptualized. There is often a disconnection between intercultural discourse and curricular design. Systematic theoretical grounded integration is required for meaningful intercultural development. Therefore, examining how bilingual education programs conceptualize and structure intercultural competence at the documentary level is not only justified but necessary. This literature confirms that intercultural communicative competence is no longer an optional addition to language education. It is central to preparing learners for an interconnected yet unequal world. This review provides the theoretical and empirical foundation upon which my research is built. Let me now explain my methodological approach. My study used a qualitative documentary research. Rather than generating new empirical data, I systematically analyzed existing scholarly literature to synthesize knowledge about intercultural competence in bilingual education. Why was this a documentary research? Intercultural competence in education is primarily expressed through documents, curriculum guidelines, textbooks, institutional policies, and pedagogical resources. This method allowed me to analyze how theory is or is not translated into practice. The primary instrument used for data collection in this study was document analysis matrix, and the entire analytical workflow was aligned with the PRISMA protocol. This research demonstrated the need for coherent, intentional approaches to intercultural competence in bilingual education. By analyzing theoretical frameworks, assessment tools, pedagogical strategies, my study provides a foundation for designing more culturally responsive and equitable bilingual programs in Colombia. Analysis revealed 6 major themes characterizing current scholarship on intercultural competence in bilingual education. Byram's ICC model emerged as the predominant theoretical foundation across 23 articles. 27 articles documented literature-based pedagogical approaches for intercultural competence development. All articles addressing teacher perspectives or institutional implementation documented a significant gap between the theoretical recognition of the importance of intercultural competence and systematic classroom integration. 25 articles conceptualize intercultural competence as transformative dimension, fundamentally reshaping language education. This transformative orientation positions culture and language as inseparable, frames English teaching as preparation for intercultural mediation rather than native speaker approximation. 15 articles identified intercultural competence assessment as underdeveloped related to theoretical and pedagogical scholarship. All empirical studies demonstrated that successful intercultural competence integration depends heavily on contextual factors including teacher, institutional support, policy frameworks, and cultural political contexts. Studies from European contexts reveal different implementation challenges than those documented in South American settings, suggesting universal frameworks require careful contextual adaptation. Documentary analysis reveals convergent findings regarding intercultural competence, conceptualization, assessment methodologies, and pedagogical approaches in bilingual education contexts. Findings address my research sub-questions examining ICC, conceptualization, assessment, and documented pedagogical approaches. 3 complementary models dominated. Byram's intercultural communicative competence framework in 27 articles, Bennett's developmental model in 18 articles, and Derdroff's process model in 10 articles. 21 articles identify assessment as significantly underdeveloped. 3 approaches emerged: psychometric instruments, performance-based evaluation like simulations and interviews, and portfolio documentation like journals, analysis, self-assessments. Persistent challenges include inherent subjectivity, tension between reliability demands and ICC attitudinal nature, limited validated instruments for South American contexts, and practical constraints for teachers lacking intercultural experiences. 18 articles documented multicultural literary text as predominant strategy. 15 articles documented ethnographic interviews, simulation surveys, learning, and virtual exchanges as experiential approaches. 16 articles advocated embedding ICC throughout curricula rather than isolated units as integrated approaches. The study successfully addressed research questions examining intercultural competence, conceptualization, assessment approaches, and documented pedagogical strategies, providing systematic synthesis relevant for Colombian bilingual education. Analysis revealed substantial field consensus around Byram's ICC model as the dominant theoretical framework, literature-based pedagogies as the predominant implementation strategy, and a persistent implementation gap between theoretical recognition and systematic practice as the field's most significant challenge. The iterative analytical approach also revealed assessment underdevelopment related to theoretical maturity. My proposed intervention or action plan suggested 3 immediate next steps. First, pilot implementation of the proposed 3-dimensional pedagogical intervention framework, curricular integration through literary texts, systematic teacher professional development, and authentic assessment frameworks in Colombian bilingual institutions through action research methodology. Second, development and preliminary validation of contextualized ICC assessment instruments appropriate for Colombian bilingual students. Third, establishment of collaborative research practitioner partnerships enable sustained engagement with Colombian bilingual institutions, facilitating iterative improvement of pedagogical approaches based on implementation feedback, and supporting teacher professional development through communities of practice. Year 1, foundation; Year 2, expansion; and Year 3, institutionalization. These proposed next steps and research recommendations provide a roadmap for advancing both theoretical understanding and practical implementation, preparing Colombian students as intercultural citizens while maintaining strong grounding in Colombian cultural identities and contributing to more just, equitable intercultural relations that challenge rather than perpetuate colonial power structures. Future research should document implementation outcomes, adaptation processes, student learning trajectories, teacher growth, and contributions to Latin American intercultural bilingual education. These are the references. Thank you. I'll be happy to answer any questions or hear your thoughts on this work.